Hello and welcome back to Jules Math Tools. So in our session today, we will be defining what is the highest common factor. And if you're ready to explore this definition, let's get started. So what exactly is the highest common factor? So the highest common factor, or our GCF, which is greatest common factor, can be defined as the largest factor that two or more numbers may have in common. Now, when looking at your highest common factor and identifying what it is, there are a few tips that you need to know. So the first thing you need to know is for a number to be considered as the highest common factor, or your GCF, it must be a factor of all of the numbers. So let's look at an example. So when I'm looking at listing the factors and identifying that highest common factor of my numbers 8, 16, and 27, the first thing I need to do is first list the factors of these numbers. So for 8, I have 1, 2, 4, and 8. For 16, we have 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. And for 27, our factors are 1, 3, 9, 27. Now, if you're having trouble with being able to list the factors of a number, I do have a video loaded on how you can list the factors of a number and identify when you have those factors as well. So when you've listed your factors for your number, now you need to look at the factors for each of these numbers. Now the first thing you're looking at is that the factor must be a factor common to all of the numbers. So we notice that in 16 and 8, we have factors such as 1, 2, 4, and 8 that are common to both of these numbers. But when we look at 27, 27 does not have the same common factor of 2, 4, and 8. And because 27 doesn't have these factors, those numbers will also be excluded from being listed or identified as the highest common factor. So the only factor that all of these numbers have in common would be the number 1. So in this case, 1 would be considered their highest common factor. We know that mostly when listing factors, 1 is not typically the number that we use to identify as the highest common factor. We usually look for numbers that are larger than 1, but in the listing method, unfortunately, 1 is the only factor that these numbers have in common. So here's a second tip when listing your highest common factor. The factor must also be the largest factor of all of the numbers. Okay, so now let's look at our factors again for 6, 18, and 24. And the first thing you must always do when identifying your GCF or your HCF is list the factors for your numbers. Now in listing my factors for these numbers, I can see that in all of these numbers, there are a common factor between all of them, which is 1, 2, 3, and 6. Now, even though all of these numbers are common factors for these numbers, remember that we are only looking for one factor that is larger than all of the others. So for my HCF for 6, 18, and 24, my HCF would be the number 6. And remember that whenever you listen to HCF, it can only be one number. You must never have two numbers listed as our highest common factor. So our HCF for this number will be 6. Okay, so I hope this was helpful to you. We went through the definition of our highest common factor, or our GCF, which is the greatest common factor. And we looked at two little simple tips that can help us when we are listing the highest common factor. So remember to apply these steps, list your factors, identify a common factor to all of your numbers, and then pluck out that one number that is larger than all of the other numbers and single that single number out as your highest common factor. And once you've done that, then you would have identified your HCF or GCF. So when you're ready to learn more factor tips and tricks, make sure that you return back to Jules Math Tools, where we make math easy.